Your materials for this project include your paper, your registration paper, your block, your brayer, your baren, the ink, a palette knife, and an inking tray. You'll find the ink, the barens, and the palette knife on the back counter, whereas on the counter by the windows will be your inking tray and your brayer where you'll be applying your ink to your block. At your table should be your white paper, your yellow registration paper, and your baren. We're going to use this yellow paper to help us with registration. Registration is aligning prints correctly from one layer to the next. It'll also help to make sure you have a consistent, even white border around your print on each paper. So to start with, you should have a clean, dry block. So you can see that I've washed mine and I need to dry all of the water out of the little grooves. And then I'm going to place it on my yellow registration paper so that it's centered. I'm making a good guess, but you are welcome to get a ruler and measure to make sure the border is even. Then trace the outline with a pencil or a marker so you can clearly see where your block should fit from one layer to the next. I'm also going to quickly sketch in an arrow and some of the features of the print so that I don't get caught up printing and misalign things. Before you begin, you also need to make sure your name is written neatly in pencil on the corner of all 10 of your white papers. I'm going to make sure this ends up on the back when I print because the labels on the front need to follow certain rules. So over on the counter, there's paper covering the counter to protect it from stray ink. You have a plastic inking tray, you have a brayer, and you have your tube of ink that you have selected from the area where the ink is. You should use as much ink as you use toothpaste. This is probably even too much that I have in the example here, so make sure you are careful when you apply your ink. Then you need to evenly spread it with the brayer. That means rolling left and right or at an angle. The goal is to evenly coat the brayer, not to evenly coat the inking tray. What is in the tray does not matter. It is not a stamp pad. Now using my evenly coated brayer, I'm going to apply the ink to my block. Make sure that everything is even and solid, so overlap the strokes of the brayer. Make sure that you don't have any little pieces of rubber that have been cut out and are leaving bumps in your ink. And make sure everything looks even and solid and consistent before you stop applying ink. You can always go pick up some more ink, or you can just spread it around with the brayer. Depends on what you need. Then you need to carefully carry your block back to your table with 2 hands underneath it. Don't let it flip and drop onto the floor. Place it within the square you've drawn on your yellow registration paper. Make sure it's well centered and matches those lines. Then you're going to lower your white paper on top, matching it with the square of the yellow registration paper. This makes sure that your print is right in the middle of your white paper. And then I'm going to use my baren, which is this tool that helps me press to help the ink adhere to the paper. You don't have to press super hard. You're basically giving your block a massage. But make sure you hit every square inch of it so that the ink will transfer over to the paper. Then you can pull the paper back to reveal your print. If there's areas that need carving out, you need to wash your block before you carve anything else. So I want to show you what you should do if you want to mix your own colors of ink. I still have some yellow ink in my tray, but that's okay because it's going to be an ingredient in my mixed color. But using 2 tubes of ink, you can mix them up just like paint basically. So use enough ink that it will get through all 10 of your prints. It's best to have your ink consistent among your prints. So I'm not doing a lot here just because I'm not actually going to make 10 prints. But I'm going to put my 2 colors together. I'm going to use my palette knife to mix those two colors of ink together. But obviously this is going to be too much ink to have for one print, and having too much ink makes a messy print. So you should use the palette knife to smush the ink off to the edge and only put a little bit out in the middle of the tray when you need it. As long as the ink makes a loud sound when you're rolling your brayer, you have the right amount of ink. If it makes no sound, it's either completely dried up or the brayer is sliding in the ink because you have too much ink. So back at your table, for each print, you'll ink it at the inking station, and then you'll carry it over to your table, align it on your yellow registration paper, and lower your white paper on top every time, smoothing with your hand or your baren, making sure the edges of your white paper align well with your yellow registration paper. You don't have to wash your block after each print. You only have to wash it if you're going to go carve something else, or you're going to change colors in the middle of your printmaking run.